The broadcast came through at 0300 Terran Central Time. Grainy footage, half-pixelated and laced with static, showed the medical frigate Hope of Soul engulfed in flame. It had no weapons, no shields, just the Red Cross emblazoned across its hull and the belief that some lines even in war were never crossed. They crossed it. The attackers were the Zandari, a pale insectoid race with whispering voices and a hive mind that had long viewed humans as illogical and emotionally volatile. They called the destruction of the Hope of Soul a preemptive neutralization of potential strategic support. That's how they explained the slaughter of 417 unarmed medics, wounded soldiers, and civilian refugees. Captain Ronan Vale sat in the war room, jaw clenched, fists tight on the table. A holographic projection of the destroyed vessel hovered before him, rotating in silence. It showed the broken spine of the ship, its medical bays ripped open like ribs, bodies drifting cold in the vacuum. No survivors. The room was dead silent, except for the steady rhythm of his breathing. He didn't blink, didn't speak, didn't need to. Everyone in that room, from fleet admirals to low-rank intelligence officers, knew what was coming. This wasn't going to be a retaliation. This was going to be a reckoning. Ronan finally stood, the thick black uniform of the Earth Interstellar Command tight against his broad frame. The scar running from his cheekbone to his jaw pulsed red from an old plasma burn, a souvenir from the first border skirmish. Back then, they tried peace. Back then, humanity still believed in diplomacy. Not anymore. He looked at the admirals seated around the war table and spoke, voice like steel dragged across granite. Operation Echo Storm begins now. No negotiations, no quarter, no stars left to hide behind. The Zandari hadn't just declared war on humanity. They declared it on every principle humans still clung to, even after all the bloodshed of the Outer Rim. And Ronan Vale had lost too much to pretend diplomacy still had a place in the vacuum. 3 days later, Earth's first and third war fleets lit their engines like twin suns. The skies above Mars glowed as ship after ship tore through the dark. Battle cruisers, siege platforms, stealth corvettes, and one ancient dreadnought that had only ever been powered up once before. The Judicator. It was an old Terran legend, a ship built during the Cold Colonization War, mothballed because its existence violated over 20 interstellar treaties. Too brutal, too devastating, too human. Now it was leading the charge. Ronan stood on the bridge of the Judicator, looking through the vast viewport as the stars bent and twisted. His second-in-command, Commander Trellin, a quiet man with eyes that never smiled, approached with a tactical tablet. Enemy fleet positioned in orbit above Galen 7, 3 defense rings, civilian centers heavily embedded with military structures, he said, handing over the display. Ronan didn't look at it. He already knew the layout. He also didn't care. They used civilian cover when they hit our medics, Ronan said flatly. We respond in kind. But Trellin hesitated. Let them burn, Ronan said, voice cold enough to freeze an engine core. And that was that. No Senate votes, no debate, just a fleet of humans who had buried too many of their own. For years, the Zandari mocked human emotion. They said we were soft, irrational, too sentimental to win a war without mercy. They were about to learn what it meant when humans stopped caring, when humans went cold, when humans didn't come to talk. They came to end you. Ronan Vale stood motionless at the edge of the command platform, eyes locked on the distant star lines folding away as the Judicator transitioned out of slipspace. The stars blinked into their rightful places, shining coldly through the forward viewplate. Directly ahead, Galen 7 sat like a jewel, blue, green, vibrant. A thriving colony world in the heart of Zandari territory. Cities stretched across its continents, hexagonal space elevators rose like spines into orbit, and around the atmosphere hung a halo of defense platforms. Some military, some research, but all armed to the teeth. The Zandari thought humans would never strike first. They were right. But this wasn't a first strike. This was justice dressed in fire. The bridge was silent, not with fear, but with the calm of people who had made peace with what needed to be done. These weren't rookies. These were soldiers, veterans, men who had pulled the dying out of burning escape pods and had whispered comfort into the ears of friends who died with half their body gone. There were no speeches, no ceremony, only orders. "Fleet-wide transmission," Ronan said, and his comms officer nodded, patching him into the entire battle group. "This is Captain Ronan Vale, Earth Interstellar Command, commanding the Judicator. You are authorized to engage. Use full firepower. Target military and hybrid structures. Civilian structures used for cover are considered compromised. Let no Zandari ship leave orbit. Do not allow survivors to regroup. This is not a conquest. This is retribution." He ended the transmission and gave a final nod to Commander Trellin. "Begin," he said. The Judicator's main weapons spun to life, deep thuds echoing through the superstructure. Its central spinal cannon, a relic of a more brutal age, was already heating up, energy readings off the scale. The Dreadnought's fusion banks screamed with potential. Ion breach torpedoes slid into tubes, railguns locked on distant orbital defenses. And then the Judicator spoke. One burst of energy shot out like the finger of a god. The Zandari's orbital station, a pride of their engineering, festooned with their flags and emblems, ceased to exist. Not broken, not crippled, gone. A wave of blue light washed over its remains, disintegrating matter on a molecular level. The first kill was not cheered. It was marked. Fleet Omega rained fire next. 30 human ships emerged from shadow drives and ambushed the defense ring from the dark side of the planet's largest moon. Their stealth cruisers, the Ghostline Reapers, released precision-guided inferno missiles, striking hardpoints and ripping apart the orbital grid before the Zandari could finish scrambling interceptors. By the time the enemy realized what was happening, they were already dying. Inside the Judicator, Ronan barely blinked. His eyes tracked every feed, tactical overlays, sensor readouts, life form counts, energy discharges, and impact maps. He watched the loss markers light up red as each Zandari ship fell. He didn't smile. There was nothing to smile about. His thoughts drifted just for a moment to the Hope of Sol, to the message that had played once before the transmission cut out. A child's voice crying, someone yelling, "We're a medical vessel, for God's sake!" Then static, then fire. Now, the fire burned the other way. The Zandari, caught off guard by the sheer brutality of Earth's assault, began to launch desperate counterattacks. Squadrons of light fighters screamed into orbit, only to be met by Earth's intercept fleets. They were fast, precise. But humans had learned too well. They'd been outgunned before, outmatched, out-teched. But not today. Human pilots flew with one thing the Zandari didn't understand: grudge. Lieutenant Kellen Dorsey, piloting a modified Talon-class strikecraft, grinned through gritted teeth as he locked onto a Zandari cruiser's shield array. His HUD blinked red. Vengeance 1, releasing payload. 2 mag-blast torpedoes roared ahead and struck true. The cruiser's shields collapsed in a shimmer of shattered light, and the second volley carved the alien ship in two. It broke apart like dry wood, bodies and debris sucked into the void. "You shouldn't have touched our medics," he muttered, banking hard to dodge the spinning husk. Elsewhere, on Galen 7's surface, the war reached new levels. Stealth drop pods from Earth's Special Forces Unit, Black Ice Division, pierced the atmosphere like black meteors. They hit the ground with silent fury. No flashy entrance, no radio chatter. They moved like ghosts in exosuits designed for urban warfare, slicing through Zandari garrisons hiding inside civilian zones. They didn't bomb hospitals, but they cleared them. A medic team held hostage in a research center was rescued after 6 minutes of pure terror. Zandari soldiers used wounded civilians as shields, but the Black Ice operatives didn't hesitate. Their kill logs showed 47 hostiles neutralized, 0 civilian casualties. Efficiency was the new morality. Ronan received live feeds from ground squads, and each time another pocket of Zandari resistance fell, he marked it. No celebration, just a steady erasure of those who dared target the helpless. They didn't just break a treaty, Ronan muttered to himself. They broke the one rule that made us human. Back in orbit, the last of the Zandari fleet tried to retreat. A group of frigates, shielded by a war cruiser, turned tail and began a slip-jump sequence. "They're fleeing," Trellin reported. "Do we let them run?" Ronan looked over slowly, voice sharp. "We're not here to send a message, Commander. We're here to finish what they started." Trellin gave the order. 4 Terran stealth corvettes decloaked behind the fleeing ships and fired disruptor missiles. The war cruiser exploded first, taking 2 frigates with it. The others were disabled, then boarded. No quarter. One of the captured Zandari officers begged in his native tongue, voice trembling, mandibles twitching. "We didn't know. We didn't mean—" Ronan watched the interrogation from the command deck. "You knew," he said quietly, almost more to himself than anyone. "You knew who was on that ship. You just didn't care." The prisoner's pleas were silenced. No execution, just cold imprisonment. Let the survivors speak of what they saw. Let the Zandari remember Earth not as emotional or irrational, but as unrelenting. Back on Earth, the footage began leaking. Unofficially, of course. Burned cities, flattened garrisons, the silence of destroyed enemy fleets. Ronan didn't deny it when the Senate demanded answers. He appeared on the live feed with his full dress uniform, eyes like storm clouds. "We did what had to be done," he said. "We will not apologize for defending those who cannot defend themselves." A senator, young, naive, challenged him. "Don't you worry about how the galaxy will see us after this?" Ronan leaned forward. "I don't care how they see us. I care how they treat us. Maybe next time they'll think twice before laying a finger on another Terran hospital." There was silence after that. Earth didn't receive another attack for the next 5 years. The Zandari entered isolation. Their border fleets retreated. Other species watched humanity from afar, no longer with scorn or contempt, but with respect. Not the respect of admiration, the respect of fear. Ronan Vale returned to Earth only once, standing in front of the Hope of Saul Memorial, a steel ark engraved with every name lost aboard the ship. His hand traced one of them, Dr. Lena Vale, his sister. The world never knew. He never told them. He had no family left, only vengeance, only silence. The fires of Guylan 7 still burned behind the Earth fleet as the stars returned to their natural rhythm. The broken remains of Zandari ships floated in orbit like fractured bones. Human recovery cruisers worked in silence, gathering whatever data could be scavenged from the wreckage, not for glory, not for trophies, but for information. This war wasn't about banners or victory parades. It was about making sure there would never be another Hope of Soul. Captain Ronan Vale didn't return to Earth with the fleet. He stayed behind, orbiting the ruins of Galen 7 aboard the Judicator. While most of the fleet began withdrawal procedures, he ordered a full planetary quarantine. Not even Terran scientists or diplomats were allowed near it. When asked why, he gave a cold answer. "We don't study what we've finished, we leave it behind." For a week, the Judicator stood sentinel over the dead world, a shadow in space that didn't blink. No Zandari rescue ships came, no protest from their high command. Just silence, like the whole species had swallowed its pride and gone into mourning. Or hiding. Back in Terran space, the strike triggered ripples no Senate debate could contain. News feeds flooded with footage, some real, some exaggerated. Civilians saw fire trails cutting across Galen skies, orbital platforms dissolving in white light, and ground cams capturing human special forces executing Zandari soldiers with clean, clinical efficiency. For every image that stirred pride, another stirred fear. Senator Grell from the outer colonies called for a full inquiry. "This is not defense," he said, pacing in front of the Galactic Assembly. "This was an extermination." Admiral Caney replied without apology. "So was what they did to our medics." Others stayed quiet. Most had voted for restraint when the Hope of Soul went down. Now they saw what restraint had brought. 417 dead, a burning ship, and the eyes of humanity demanding blood. Ronan ignored the politics. He wasn't interested in being the face of a movement or a hero of war. He had delivered the message, paid in steel and fire, and that was enough. But the universe wouldn't let him go. 3 weeks after the Gailan Purge, a transmission came through, unmarked, encrypted in a pre-Senate diplomatic cipher. Not Terran, not Zandari either. It came from a fringe species known as the Ithari, tall, bird-like philosophers who rarely intervened in galactic affairs. They had no military, no trade, no territory worth fighting over. But they watched. And when they reached out, it wasn't to exchange pleasantries. The message was short. "You have shifted the balance. Be warned. The others are watching." Ronan stared at it for a long time. Then he leaned back, eyes narrowing. Let them watch. He had other concerns. His fleet had received intelligence from deep space scans near the neutral border of the Virax Belt, a region filled with derelict stations, illegal outposts, and forgotten conflicts. The Hope of Sol hadn't been the only target in recent months. Several other humanitarian transports, non-Terran, had also gone dark. But no one talked about them. No one retaliated. No one had the spine. Until Earth showed the galaxy that being civilized didn't mean being soft. Commander Trellin entered the briefing room where Ronan stood alone, the transmission from the Ithari still flickering on a side screen. "We've traced back supply shipments tied to the Zandari weapons used against the Hope. Turns out they didn't come from Zandari factories," Trellin reported. "Where then?" Ronan asked. "A syndicate. Arms dealers based outside the Senate's reach. Mostly neutral, but they've been supplying both sides of conflicts for years. Quiet. Unseen." Ronan's jaw tightened. "So someone gave them the tools to butcher our wounded, and then stood back and watched." Trellin nodded. "Could be fear, could be politics, could be just credits." "And where's this syndicate now?" "Virax Belt, operating out of a rogue station, Noctis Forge." Ronan stared at the star map Trellin pulled up. The Judicator was already shifting course before the briefing ended. They didn't wait for Senate approval this time. Earth Command didn't even ask. They knew what Ronan was going to do. No one tried to stop him. The Judicator jumped into the Virax Belt like a phantom. No parades, no newsfeed alerts. Just one man and his fleet chasing ghosts. Noctis Forge wasn't a city. It was a tumor, bolted together from decades of salvage, dead tech, and illegal upgrades. It spun lazily above a gas giant like a rusted crown, pulsing with dirty lights and overcrowded with outlaws, mercs, slavers, and smugglers who didn't care who they sold to as long as the credits cleared. When the Judicator dropped out of slip space and hung silently above it, panic spread through the station like a virus. They knew who he was. They knew why he'd come. One by one, shuttles tried to flee. Ronan let them go. He wasn't here for the rats. He wanted the king. Inside the station, at the core of the trading vaults, was a man named Varric, a Terran by blood, but not by loyalty. He had sold weapons to the Zandari months before the Hope of Soul massacre. Hadn't asked what they were for. Didn't care. He just wanted payment. Ronan entered the vault alone. No guards, no armor. Just his black uniform and the eyes of a man who had nothing left to lose. Varric tried to bluff, leaning back in his chair like he still had power. "You can't touch me here. This is neutral ground." Ronan didn't answer. He just set a data pad on the desk. The screen played grainy footage. A Zandari trooper dragging a human nurse by the throat. Her screams cut off in a flash of plasma. Varric's face paled. "I just sell the parts," Varric said quickly. "I didn't give the order. I'm not—" "You funded the weapons. You outfitted the assault. You made it possible." Ronan's voice was low, steady, and absolute. "You gave them the knife," he said, "and they slit our throat." Varric stood suddenly. "I can pay! I can disappear! I have names, contacts! Listen to me!" But Ronan had already pulled the trigger. One round. Clean. Straight through the heart. The Judicator bombarded Noctis Forge 30 minutes later. Not a full cleanse. Just enough to send a message. Half the station went dark. All Syndicate operations were shut down. The survivors scattered. Ronan didn't chase them. He had sent his message. Humanity wasn't just done talking. They were hunting. A month passed. Across the galaxy, whispers spread. Other species, once proud, once arrogant, began issuing quiet statements of respect, sometimes laced with fear. Not formal apologies, but acknowledgments. That Earth was no longer the soft-spoken mediator. They were something else now, something ancient, something dangerous. The Athari sent one final transmission. "You have reminded the stars what fear tastes like. Be ready, they will remember." Ronan stared into space from the bridge of the Judicator. The stars were quiet now. Not peaceful, just waiting. The galaxy had made one thing very clear. If they ever dared target Earth's wounded again, Earth wouldn't come to negotiate. They would come to end you. The stars were quieter now, but Ronan Vale didn't trust silence. It was never peace. Not in this galaxy. Silence meant someone was watching, waiting, recalculating. Maybe to retaliate, maybe to beg. Either way, he knew the cost of stillness. It always came with more blood. The Judicator floated above the ruined carcass of a Syndicate listening post on the edge of the Varka dead zone. Another black site. Another ghost station. Its crew had jumped ship the moment they picked up the Dreadnought's warp signature. They left their data cores behind, which was a mistake. Ronan didn't care about names anymore. He wanted patterns, connections, and he was starting to see them. Commander Trellan stood beside him, holding a decrypted dossier. "They were tracking refugee ships," Trellan said. "Not just ours, others too. Humanitarian vessels, mostly unarmed." Ronan stared at the screen. Markers lit up across the map. Freighters, transports, aid ships, gone. All gone in the last 18 months. Quiet vanishings, silent hits, no wars declared, no claims made. "Why haven't the others spoken up?" Ronan asked, already knowing the answer. Trellin shrugged. They're not us. They don't avenge their dead. They absorb the loss, call it unfortunate, tragic, political. They don't want war. They want stability. But stability is a lie, Ronan muttered. It just means suffering quietly. A long pause filled the bridge. Sir, Trellin said finally, voice low, we're not just punishing criminals anymore. The Senate is calling you a liability. Ronan turned his head, slowly. They think we're dangerous now. They think you're unstoppable, sir. The sentence sat heavy in the air. Ronan Vale had always been a tool of justice, a soldier who followed orders, even if he disagreed with them. But somewhere between the hope of Saul and Noctis Forge, something changed. He had seen how diplomacy failed, how hesitation got nurses and wounded civilians slaughtered like animals. He was done waiting for permission. And now, the galaxy feared what that kind of man could become. The pressure mounted when Earth's Senate called for a formal hearing. It wasn't a trial. Not yet. But it smelled like one. Ronan was ordered to return to Earth, dock at Atlas Station, and appear before the Defense Oversight Committee. A hollow panel of political appointees, advisors, and career bureaucrats. People who never saw the inside of a medbay after a plasma strike. People who still believed you could reason with those who used children as shields. He didn't want to go. But he went. Out of duty, not respect. The Judicator docked like a shadow against Atlas Station's bright white hull. It dwarfed every vessel around it. People stared. They always did now. Ronan walked into the Senate chamber in full black command uniform. No ribbons, no medals, just the insignia of Earth's interstellar command. The symbol of a man who'd taken justice into his own hands. The room was packed. Dozens of senators sat in tiered rows, their holographic files glowing with evidence, quotes, data. A few glared. Some just watched. A small number nodded in quiet approval. Senator Grell led the charge. You ordered the unprovoked destruction of a civilian trade hub, Noctis Forge, he began, voice calm but pointed. That station had over 9,000 inhabitants. Ronan didn't blink. And 217 confirmed military contracts with races actively involved in the targeting of non-combatant ships. Unproven. Until I arrived, Ronan snapped. Their records showed sales to Xandari factions 3 days before the hope of Saul was hit. They knew, they helped, and they profited. Senator Grell pressed on. And who appointed you judge, jury, and executioner? Ronan leaned forward, voice quiet but sharp. The dead did. Silence. Then another senator stood, older, less theatrical. Captain Vale, she said, measured and cold, you've made us look like monsters. Entire civilizations are afraid to open channels with us. Your actions may trigger a larger conflict. Are you prepared to be the reason Earth burns in a galactic war? Ronan looked around the chamber, his voice low, each word landing like a hammer. I didn't make us look like monsters. I reminded them we weren't prey. Another silence, this one longer. That night they voted on whether to strip Ronan of command. It failed by 2 votes, not because the senators agreed with him, but because somewhere deep down, even the most cautious among them knew one brutal truth. Sometimes monsters were necessary. Weeks passed. The galaxy didn't retaliate, but it also didn't forget. On the far side of the spiral arm, in a cold sector known as the Hollow Claw, something stirred. Reports filtered in. Slow, fractured, distorted. Human colonies on the edge went dark. Outposts vanished. No distress calls, no bodies. Just emptiness. The only clue was a name. The Black Accord. A coalition. Not a government. Not a race. A cabal of those who had profited from war for centuries. Smugglers. Arms dealers. Mercenary generals. War cults. silent financiers. They'd watched Earth's rise with concern, watched Ronan Vale burn through syndicate lines. They hadn't retaliated yet, because they were preparing something bigger. Back aboard the Judicator, Ronan received the intel reports in his private quarters. He studied the data, the patterns, the vanishing dots on the star map. "They're baiting us," Trellin said, standing nearby. "They want us to overextend," Ronan agreed. "They want us angry." Trellin nodded slowly. "And we are." Ronan stood. "Get the fleet ready. We're going hunting." This wasn't revenge anymore. This was war. But not the kind of war the Senate wanted. This would be a quiet war, a shadow war, the kind of war you didn't survive, only endure. By the time Earth realized what was coming, it was too late to stop him. Ronan Vale had already crossed the line, and he wasn't coming back. The stars looked different in Black Accord space. They didn't shine. They glared. Ronan Vale stood at the observation deck of the Judicator, staring out into the stretch of nothing known as Deadlight Expanse, a forgotten strip of unclaimed space that no empire officially acknowledged, but every warlord knew by name. It was a no-man's zone, neutral on paper, poison in practice. The Judicator was quiet now, running under blackout protocol, no comms, no active sensors. Ghost mode. Even the lights inside the ship were dim, red, and quiet, like the hum of a beast holding its breath. Earth Command hadn't authorized the move into Deadlight. The Senate had ordered him to stand down after Partisan Station went dark. He ignored them. He knew who was behind the disappearances. The Black Accord wasn't a rumor anymore. It was real, and he had tracked its pulse to a cluster of systems deep inside the expanse where maps stopped and signals went missing. The Accord didn't wear flags. It didn't have borders. But it had influence. You saw it in patterns: Zandari weapons on pirate hulls, mercenaries with syndicate tags, orbital stations with rotating slave markets, and human tech bought under old codes. And above all, silence. Every time one of these stations got hit, no one claimed responsibility. No survivors, no message, just death. But now, Ronan was going to break that silence, one piece at a time. "Target confirmed," Commander Trellin said, entering the deck. "Long-range scans put a blacksite logistics hub behind that asteroid field. No shields, light security. Looks like they're hiding something, not defending it." Ronan nodded. "What do we have on the ground?" "About 300 staff. Maybe 50 guards. We have visual on 4 freighters, unregistered, and one larger vessel tagged to the Vesker cartel. They're using human frequencies." Ronan's eyes sharpened. "And the cargo?" "Crates marked medical relief. UN classified." That was enough. He turned toward the ops deck and spoke one word. "Burn them." The strike began silently. 4 black ice infiltration pods launched from the Judicator's underbelly, gliding through the debris cloud like sharks beneath a blood-soaked ocean. Each one carried 6 operators, elite Terran forces trained for zero light, no support missions. They didn't speak. They didn't signal. They simply landed, breached, and bled their way forward. Inside the hub, the Accord's smugglers barely knew what hit them. The first explosion took out the primary comms center. The second erased the flight hangar. And by the time the guards realized it was an actual military assault, not a rival gang hit, they were already dead. Ronan watched it all from the command deck. Helmet cams, biofeeds, each kill logged in real time. One of the operators, callsign Hammer, dragged a Vesker officer out from a hidden room, pistol-whipped him to the floor, and pulled a memory shard from the alien's pocket. "I have something," Hammer said through gritted teeth. "Upload it," Ronan ordered. The shard's contents appeared on the Judicator's tactical display. Shipping manifests, payment trails, encrypted comms, everything tied back to the Accord's central operation. Multiple stations, hidden arsenals, and one phrase repeated in dozens of documents: Project Morning Star. "What is that?" Trellin asked. Ronan didn't answer. He just stared at the coordinates tied to the name. A station deep in the Ophiuchi Rift. Unreachable, unwelcoming, but not for long. Before heading out, Ronan did something he hadn't done in years. He sat alone in the war room and opened an old file. A recording. One he hadn't played since the Hope of Sol went down. It was a message left by his sister Lena. She hadn't known she was going to die when she recorded it. She'd been cheerful. Too cheerful. "I told you not to join the damn Navy," she laughed in the video, holding a cup of recycled coffee. "But you always were too stubborn for your own good." She paused then, eyes softer. "But if you're watching this, I know something happened, and I hope you did something about it. Because people like us, we don't get to stand back and let evil walk." Ronan didn't smile, didn't cry. He just sat there, staring at the last flicker of family he had left, burning that last memory into his mind before destroying what had caused it. The fleet jumped again. Slipspace was thinner near the rift, unstable, jagged. Most captains wouldn't risk jumping into it without full navigational clearance. But Ronan didn't care. Let the rift tear open. He was coming through anyway. The Judicator emerged in high orbit above a broken world. One large moon, 5 ruined orbital platforms, a single artificial construct hung at the Lagrange point, a space station, half-cloaked, surrounded by debris and silent weapon satellites. Trellin looked up from his display. "That's Morning Star." "What's its purpose?" Ronan asked. Trellin scanned faster. "It's not a shipyard, not a command center either. It's a, sir." "What?" Trellin turned to him. "It's a weapons test facility. Biological Ronan's blood ran cold." "Human? Not just human? Human targets?" He pulled up more logs. Archive footage, experiment tags, transport records. They had taken prisoners, survivors from raided ships, medics, aid workers, civilians, test subjects. "Get me inside," Ronan ordered. The assault on Morning Star was brutal. The Accord didn't run. This time, they fought. Automated defense grids lit up like a dying sun, missiles streaking through orbit, flak rounds tearing through clouds of decoy drones. The Judicator lost 2 escort frigates before breaching the outer ring. But when it broke through, it didn't slow down. Ronan led the breach team personally. His armor was black on black. No insignia, no rank. He moved like a man possessed. The interior of Morning Star was worse than any battlefield he'd known. The walls were lined with sealed chambers, each one lit with low, sickly light. Inside them, humans, some alive, some not. Some were barely human anymore. He passed one window and stopped. A young boy stared back at him. Maybe 9 years old, skin pale, tubes in his neck, eyes wide with that awful mix of hope and terror. He mouthed something Ronan couldn't hear. Ronan ripped the door open, tore the restraints off, and picked the boy up. "Commander," he growled into the comms, "we have prisoners. I want every medical unit we've got on site. Anyone alive, we take. Anyone responsible, we erase." They found the Accord's chief scientist hiding in the core labs. Ronan didn't wait for questions. He put a bullet through his leg, dragged him into one of the test chambers, and locked him in. The scientist screamed through the glass. "You don't know what you're doing. You're destroying decades of research." Ronan stared at him through the window, then activated the chamber's purge protocol, and walked away. Morning Star went dark 3 hours later. No survivors. At least not from the Accord side. Earth's Black Ops teams rescued 78 prisoners. They were weak, scarred. Some would never speak again, but they were alive. And Ronan had given them back something that had been stolen from them. Vengeance. The Senate didn't respond immediately. No one wanted to touch it. The accord wasn't officially recognized, and the station wasn't listed in any treaty. But Earth Command knew the truth. Ronan Vale had crossed a threshold. He wasn't fighting wars anymore. He was ending systems. And now every power that benefited from neutrality, from quiet corruption, from silence, knew their time was up. Because Earth wasn't asking questions anymore. And Ronan wasn't sending warnings. He was coming. The galaxy had changed. The name Ronan Vale was no longer whispered. It was spoken aloud. Like a warning, like a storm front moving across the stars. In under a year, the captain of Earth's deadliest dreadnought had become more feared than entire fleets, not because of what he said, but because of what he did. Morning Star was the final straw for many. He hadn't just destroyed a black site. He'd uncovered proof that the Accord had experimented on human civilians, children, medics, captured aid workers from peaceful colonies. The footage leaked almost instantly. Someone on the Judicator, maybe Trellin, maybe one of the comms officers, had sent it to Earth media. It spread like wildfire. And for a brief moment, Ronan Vale was hailed a hero. Marches on Earth, Luna, and Mars turned his name into a rallying cry. Never again. Mothers carried pictures of the survivors he'd rescued. Veterans wept. Even the Senate paused their usual finger-wagging and held a moment of silence for the victims. But moments pass, and fear returns. Because while the public praised him, the politicians grew restless. "You're out of control," Admiral Caney said in a secure conference with Ronan, her face tight with worry. This was supposed to be retaliation, not a warpath. Ronan stood with arms crossed, eyes unmoved. "It was retaliation, until we found their labs." Caney narrowed her gaze. "You destroyed Morning Star without oversight. You led the strike yourself. You're not a rogue agent, Captain. You represent Earth. You wear the flag." "I am the flag," Ronan replied quietly, "and the flag has blood on it. So I clean it. My way." Caney flinched, just a little. "You're pushing them into a corner," she warned. "The Accord is gone, but its backers aren't. You've made enemies in high places, and now Earth is being cut off." She showed him the list. Trade routes denied, embassies recalled, diplomatic ties severed, neutral systems, ones that once bought Earth's technology and needed its protection, were now too afraid to be seen standing beside them. "You turned us into the monster at the edge of the galaxy," Caney said. Ronan stared for a long moment. "Good." Then he cut the line. Inside the Judicator, things were shifting. The crew still followed him. Some even worshipped him. Not in the godlike way ancient soldiers revered their generals, but as men who had found someone willing to do what needed to be done. They had seen the hospital ships burn. They had counted the bodies. Ronan gave them justice, not speeches. But Commander Trellin, he was changing. He'd been Ronan's most loyal man, the one who never questioned an order. But now, Ronan noticed his silences were longer. His objections came through stiffer posture, downcast eyes, and the way he hesitated to report bad news. "Say what you're thinking," Ronan said finally, one late night on the command deck. Trellin glanced around. No one else on the bridge. Then he spoke. "You saved people at Morning Star, sir. You did something the rest of us were too scared to attempt. But you also locked a scientist in a test chamber and watched him die. No trial, no records, just vengeance." "He ran those labs," Ronan said. "He tested children like weapons." "I know," Trellin said. "But what separates us from them? Justice without rules becomes execution. I followed you because you believed in the line. I just want to know." He paused. Is the line still there? Ronan looked out into the void, the scars on his face catching the dim starlight. There is no line, he said. There's survival, and there's history, and we don't get to make both. Trellin left without a word. The next blow didn't come from outside. It came from Earth. The Senate called for Ronan's arrest. Officially, the vote was 61 to 49. Just enough. They cited unsanctioned military action, violation of galactic conventions, and potential war crimes. The order was signed and broadcast. Ronan watched the press conference in silence. His photo, his name, his rank, all displayed behind the senators as they denounced the very man they once begged to avenge their dead. When the video ended, Ronan didn't move. He just turned to his crew and said, "They want to bury the weapon they built. But they can't, because I am the war they started." Back on Earth, protests erupted. Free Ronan. Justice for the Hope. Protect the Dreadnought. But in the shadows, powerful people were moving. Lobbyists, foreign dignitaries, even Earth's own allies started issuing quiet ultimatums. Control Ronan, or we will. Someone had to stop him. Someone who knew him better than anyone. His former Academy rival, Captain Darren Holt, was given command of the ESS Arclight, a next-generation stealth cruiser with orders to intercept and disable the Judicator. Holt had always hated Ronan's methods, saw him as a brute hiding behind trauma. Where Ronan led with fear, Holt believed in unity, law, and command structure. "Don't kill him," the Senate told Holt. But they didn't mean it. Holt left with a fleet of 5 ships. The confrontation came at the edge of the Varnus cluster, above a dead moon where Ronan had planned to strike another hidden Accord relay. The Arclight uncloaked and hailed the Judicator. "Ronan Vale, this is Captain Darren Holt of Earth Command. By authority of the Senate, stand down and prepare to be taken into custody." Ronan didn't respond at first. Then he stepped onto the bridge, turned to Trellin, and said, "He's a good man." Trellin nodded, unsure. "But good men don't stop wars," Ronan said. He opened the comms. "Darren, I'm going to give you one chance to turn around. You're not in command anymore, Ronan. You're a rogue with a death count higher than half our wars combined." "I am our wars." Holt's fleet began powering weapons. The Judicator didn't move. Then, with a low hum, its dread core began to awaken. "We're on the same side?" Holt said, but even he didn't believe it anymore. "No," Ronan said, eyes like ice. "We're on different timelines. Yours ends here." The battle was short. The Arclight was fast, clever, but the Judicator was raw power, too large to dodge, too fortified to bleed. The Dreadnought tore through Holt's fleet in under 9 minutes, but Ronan didn't kill him. He let Holt's escape pod drift. A reminder. A warning. And maybe one last thread to the life Ronan could never return to. By the end of the week, Earth was fractured. The Senate couldn't deny Ronan's success, but they couldn't control the storm he had become. Half the fleet still followed him. The rest watched carefully. As for the galaxy, the stars held their breath, because the man who brought silence to the Accord was now the enemy of the very home he once defended. The stars above Varnus burned cold. Wreckage still floated in orbit, shrapnel from the battle between Judicator and the Earth fleet sent to capture her. Pieces of the once proud ESS Arclight drifted silently in the void, along with the remains of ships that had once borne the Terran crest with pride. The message was clear. Ronan Vale wouldn't be taken quietly, but neither would Earth let it go unchallenged. The fracture was open now. Not theoretical, not political. Real. Earth's command structure had splintered. High Admiral Caney, under pressure from the Senate, ordered all loyal Terran vessels to disengage from Ronan's fleet. She called his strike against Captain Holt an unforgivable escalation, a line no soldier could cross. But many still followed him, some because they believed, others because they were too far gone to come back, and some because they had nothing else left. Ronan stood at the observation platform of the Judicator, watching Trellin quietly as the younger officer reviewed fleet movements. "You're losing allies," Trellin said without looking up. "Several frigates pulled back. One of our fuel carriers defected. You're bleeding ships faster than you're replacing them." Ronan didn't respond. Trellin looked up finally. "You can't win a war with no rear line." "I'm not fighting a war," Ronan said. "I'm ending one." Trellin's jaw tensed. "Then maybe it's time you admit something." Ronan turned to him slowly. "You're not saving Earth anymore. You're shaping it into something you think it needs to be. That's not war. That's control." Silence settled between them. And then Ronan said something no one expected. "I don't know how to stop." It was the first time Trellin saw the man's eyes lose focus. Just a second, a blink, but it was there. The grief hadn't dulled. It had hardened, turned into iron. And once you become iron, it's hard to be flesh again. Back on Earth, the protests boiled into riots. Civilian unrest had reached its highest point in a decade. Half the population saw Ronan as a traitor. The other half saw him as the last honest man in the system. The name Judicator was painted on walls, on bodies, in blood. Rebel factions rose, calling themselves the Silent Fleet, claiming to represent the true Terran will. Senator Grell, the loudest voice calling for Ronan's arrest, was attacked during a broadcast. The message sprayed across the wall behind him said, "You buried the truth." He unearthed it. High Admiral Caney faced assassination attempts. The Senate issued martial law in half the outer colonies. And behind all of it, somewhere in the shadows, the remnants of the Black Accord began to stir again. Not openly, but with precision. Because chaos was always good for business. On a mining moon called Therion 9, far beyond the reach of most charts, a hidden message arrived for Ronan. It came from a contact buried deep in the intelligence service. An old friend, long thought dead. The name flashed once. Dresk. The message was short, but it chilled Ronan to the core. "They've rebuilt, and they're not hiding anymore. The Accord isn't dead. They've merged with something worse. They call it the Cradle Protocol, and they're building a fleet, not to attack Earth, but to replace it. Come to Cinder Reach. You'll see it yourself. Bring fire." Ronan stared at the blinking message. Cradle Protocol. He didn't know what it was, but he recognized the meaning behind it. They weren't planning retaliation. They were planning rebirth, the kind of rebirth that didn't leave room for survivors. He called the fleet into emergency formation. Trellin entered the war room, already halfway through decoding the Cinder Reach coordinates. "This isn't a black site," Trellin said. "It's something new. Someone's been building out there, mining moons, draining atmospheres, shielded structures, old pre-fall tech." "Which means they're not rebuilding a station," Ronan said. "They're building something worse." Trellin looked up. "A new Earth?" "No," Ronan said darkly. "A replacement for humanity, a controlled version, one they can manage." The Accord never wanted to conquer Earth. They wanted to erase it and grow their own version of it, free from rebellion, from sentiment, from men like him. The Judicator arrived at Cinder Reach 3 days later. The sky above the world was wrong, too smooth, too clean. Dozens of orbital rings surrounded the planet like webbing, each one rotating, pulsing with artificial light, humming with energy too advanced for any known species. And in the center, a station the size of a moon. Black steel. No windows. No broadcasts. But life signatures. Thousands of them. Most of them human, but altered, synchronized heart rates, brainwave alignment, genetic duplication. Ronan had seen this once before, in prototype files Earth's AI labs had buried decades ago. Synthetic biology, engineered obedience, cloned citizens, an entire world of manufactured Terrans, raised from birth to serve. No independence, no dissent, no Ronan veil. Is this what they think we are? Trellin whispered, watching the scans in horror. No, Ronan said. It's what they think we should be. They didn't wait. They attacked. The Judicator opened fire on the outer orbital rings, unleashing its dreadcore for the first time in weeks. The beam split the sky like a god scream, vaporizing half a defense grid and crippling the reactor chain holding 2 stabilization tethers in place. The clone fleets scrambled. Dozens of ships, identical in shape, crewed by expressionless humans, swarmed forward like insects. No tactics, no fear, just programming. Ronan's fleet fought with grit, instinct, pain, the very things the Accord's forces lacked, and that made them unpredictable. Deadly, but also outnumbered. One by one, Ronan's escort ships were hit, breached, disabled. The Judicator took 3 direct hull breaches. One of its side thrusters exploded. Ronan refused to fall back. "This ends here," he told Trellin. "We won't survive this," Trellin said, bleeding from a head wound. "Then we make sure they don't either." Ronan ordered a dive, straight into the enemy's atmosphere control ring. The Judicator spun on its axis, rotating its spinal cannon toward the cradle station's reactor. He had one shot. He activated the core manually, burned his own hands on the heat conduits. Over the ship-wide intercom, he spoke for the last time. Humanity was never clean, never obedient. We fought, we rebelled, we made mistakes, but we were real. What you built here, it isn't life. It's a lie. Then he fired. The beam pierced through 3 kilometers of armor, struck the core of the cradle station, and cracked it open like bone. Everything erupted. Cinder Reach exploded in a wave of silent light, erasing half its orbit and setting off chain reactions across every artificial construct tethered to it. No one heard from Ronan Vale again. But the Judicator was found a month later, dead in the void. Scarred, but intact. Inside the command deck, there was no body, only his black uniform, hung across the captain's chair, folded neatly, waiting. The galaxy was quiet. For the first time in years, there were no flare-ups, no hospital ships burned, no black sites raided. The smuggler channels fell silent, pirate groups collapsed without funding, and the last remnants of the Black Accord went into hiding or vanished completely. The Cradle Protocol was dead. Cinder Reach, once a terrifying monument to synthetic humanity, had become a graveyard of progress gone wrong. Fragments of its shattered orbital rings still drifted through space, glowing faintly like veins under skin. No rescue ships came. No salvage crews dared enter the debris field. Radiation storms swirled around the dead planet like a curse. The world had been erased by fire, and so had the man who lit the match. Ronan Vale was gone. Not confirmed dead, not confirmed alive, just gone. Vanished like a ghost into the black. And in his absence, something strange happened. Earth changed. The Senate tried to spin it at first. They held emergency broadcasts declaring Ronan a necessary evil, a tool of last resort that had been decommissioned. They said his actions, while brutal, had exposed threats they themselves were unaware of. They tried to own him, but the people didn't let them. Because Ronan Vale didn't belong to the Senate, he belonged to the dead, to the medics on the Hope of Soul, to the prisoners in Morning Star, to the boy in the lab chamber whose eyes still haunted the dreams of every soldier on the Judicator. And more than anything, he belonged to those who would never forget. A statue went up, not on Earth, but on a moon called Jericho's Fall, a lonely rock where Ronan's fleet once resupplied during the earliest days of the Accord Purge. The local colonists built it themselves. No permits, no funding, just raw steel. It showed Ronan in his war uniform, standing with one boot atop a broken Zandari rifle. His hand wasn't raised in salute or victory. It was open, empty, not asking for thanks, not giving mercy, just there, like he always was. The inscription below it read, "When the stars went silent, he screamed louder." Trellan survived. He became a name in history books, too, but in a different way. After Cinderreach, he took command of what was left of the Judicator, returning it to Sol's system with the few surviving crew. He didn't attend the Senate inquiries, didn't speak to the media. He retired, vanished to a private colony. But before he left, he released one thing: a log, a personal record, a spoken word file dated 3 days before the final assault on Cinderreach. Ronan's voice. "You don't get to choose what they remember. You don't get to decide if you're a hero or a butcher. You only get to act. I didn't burn worlds to inspire them. I did it because no one else would. Let them call me what they want. Just let them remember this." We fought back. It was played on every news channel across Earth. It went viral across fringe colonies. Veterans of the hospital fleet wept hearing his voice again. Students quoted it. Soldiers printed it on patches. The phrase, "we fought back," became a code, one that meant resistance, refusal, rage against being prey. And the enemies of Earth? They listened too, and they didn't come closer. 50 years passed. A new alliance formed in the Outer Rim, one founded not by Earth, but by colonies that had once watched their aid ships burn. They called themselves the Veil Compact, a defense network that promised a single thing: no one hurts the helpless again. They used his name openly. They wore his crest, and they built a fleet forged in memory. The first dreadnought of the new class was named Ronan's Oath. Its first mission? Escorting hospital vessels through war-torn zones in the Delcar Reach. The enemies watched them pass, and didn't fire. Because in every ship that bore the insignia of Ronan Vale, there was an understanding. Not a treaty, not diplomacy, just fear and respect. There were rumors, of course, that he'd lived, that he had escaped in a stealth pod before the cradle reactor blew, that he walked among the outer colonies as a farmer, that he wore civilian clothes and only raised his voice when someone crossed a line. One tale said a man with a scar down his cheek showed up on a mining world after a pirate raid. He didn't say a word, just took a rusted rifle from a wall and walked into the dark. The next day, 20 pirates were dead. The man was gone, the rifle left behind. Was it him? No one knew, but no one questioned it either. Because legend isn't about truth, it's about memory. And the galaxy remembered. They remembered the ship that never flinched, the fleet that never bowed, the man who made monsters afraid to close their eyes. Ronan Vale didn't return to Earth, because he became something Earth couldn't hold. He became the scream in the silence. He became the black flag against injustice. He became the dreadnought in the dark, always watching, always ready. And to those who threatened the weak, who thought they could hide behind treaties and shadows, he became a promise. If you touch the helpless, he will come, and he will burn your stars to ash.